Things are spiraling for the Trump administration. You can feel it, you can read it in the news, and you can see it from how the White House is acting. Over the weekend and into this week, things started to escalate. This last weekend was the deadliest weekend in the Iran war in months for the U.S. military, as we learned the Pentagon had been hiding casualty numbers and doesn't have a plan to get the country out of this conflict. Then, the Department of Homeland Security is escalating immigration raids and election threats against states and cities as the options the president has to meddle with the midterms dwindle. The big question is the White House looking to make this escalation a sprint for a news cycle or a marathon to November? It's Tuesday, July 21st, 2026. Welcome to Make It Make Sense. I'm Grant Hermes. Before we get into things today, and don't skip this ad, you're going to want to hear this. Today marks 2 years of Make It Make Sense. 2 years ago, this was just me, a camera, and an idea. I walked away from a career, a traditional newsroom. I had no clue if this was going to work. Now it's 3 episodes a week, interviews with people who are actually shaping the stories we're reading about, weekly meaningful deep dive reporting, a brand new civics project, culture essays. None of that happens without people like you deciding this thing is worth supporting, and I am so thankful, no matter how you choose to support. Here's the ask, though. That is a lot of work for a one-man show. And the price hasn't changed since I started. It is still $5 a month on the Substack, which is the minimum I can charge. That's changing. On August 21st, it's going to go up to $7 a month. So, here's what I'm offering. If you head to the Make It Make Sense Substack and become a paid subscriber or go annual before then, you can keep that $5 a month or $50 a year locked in for as long as you're subscribed. No questions asked. The link's in the show notes. And if you're already a subscriber, thank you. Seriously, you're the reason that there's a year 3 with hopefully a lot more to go. All right, let's get on with the show. Over the weekend, the war in Iran entered a new, deadlier, much more dangerous phase. The administration does not seem to have a way out of this war, and if anything, is insisting that we just keep digging in deeper. The U.S. has hit multiple pieces of civilian infrastructure, including water plants, power plants, and bridges, under the Geneva Convention and, according to the head of the UN Human Rights Division, targeting those amounts to multiple war crimes. Now, the Pentagon denies that these were civilian targets and instead says they were used by the Iranian military. A White House spokesperson told the BBC the U.S. military, quote, carried out strikes exclusively on military targets, including military logistics infrastructure. That gets kind of fuzzy, according to international law. Things like roads and bridges and water plants and power plants can be considered dual use if the military and civilians also use them. But if they are dual use, that doesn't mean you can just bomb them. They're still civilian infrastructure, and it would still be a war crime. But that gets tricky. And as of today, it has been 10 days of sustained bombing inside Iran from the U.S. Here's how Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth put that in the Oval Office today.
Iran's been given every opportunity to negotiate, to show that they're reasonable on the Strait of Hormuz. But if they're going to shoot at commercial shipping, then we're going to hit them, as the president said, 10 times harder, which every night we're degrading them further and further. And the president has all the options necessary. If they want to talk, they can talk. Otherwise, they can deal with the War Department, and we're prepared to do that.
So the thing is, we've been told over and over that Iran's military was wiped out, 100% destroyed. Trump has said it every single month of the war except for in February, but only because the war started on the last day of February. Iran has retaliated and launched missiles and drones against civilian ships in the Strait of Hormuz, which is still closed, and as of today, the investment firm Goldman Sachs is saying that the price of oil could go well above $120 a barrel, which is a lot. And then 3 U.S. service members were killed and another is still missing after a missile strike. One was killed by a detonation of a downed Iranian drone on a U.S. base in Iraq, and 2 were killed in that missile strike on our airbase in Jordan, along with that service member who is still missing in action. That brings the total number of soldiers killed in the Iran war to 17. That is higher than the evacuation of Afghanistan that nearly derailed the Biden presidency. Now, the president has promised on Truth Social, every time Iran kills an American soldier, they will pay for that killing many times over. And there seems to be no end in sight to this war because when he was asked about this peace deal or the potential of one returning, so it would seem that the plan is then to bomb our way out of this war, which has not worked at all so far. In fact, has gotten us into a deeper hole. And then we learned that the Pentagon has been lying to the American people about the number of U.S. soldiers wounded and killed in this war. The New York Times is reporting that the Pentagon has withheld nearly 100 casualties for weeks and didn't report multiple other strikes on that U.S. base in Jordan, more than 1,000 miles from Iran. On top of that, the Wall Street Journal found the Pentagon has not been adequately protecting service members on that base in Jordan by housing them in sheet metal, prefabricated housing that looks more like shipping containers than barracks. A Pentagon spokesperson said on Twitter that the majority of those wounded service members, those 100 that they didn't tell us about, were able to return to active duty after suffering only minor injuries or concussions, but that's not really the point. The cover-up is the point. The war is already unpopular. It's wildly expensive. There is clearly no plan to get us out of this thing or even a will to do so. In fact, it seems to be the opposite. And now we learn that we're being actively misled about the human cost of this conflict that we were promised that this president wouldn't start. That is a big deal. And I know this feels short for this segment here, but I'm going to keep it here because this week on Friday, Eric Zuleger from The Underreport is back on the show, and we do a lot more talking about this. So I'm going to take a quick break, and when we come back, the escalation here at home, this time for the Department of Homeland Security. You know how every social media platform is basically engineered to make you angry and keep you scrolling? That's not an accident. Outrage performs better than nuance, so the algorithm feeds you outrage. I see it every day as someone making news content for a living. The loudest, most biased takes get the reach. The careful, fact-driven stuff like I do my best to bring you here gets buried. That's why I joined SAYSO. It's a brand new news app just launched, built by a group of former journalists and engineers who asked, what if we build news from scratch for people who actually want to be informed instead of people who just want to keep scrolling? No algorithm optimizing for outrage, no AI slop, just vetted creators delivering fact-driven coverage, curated so you can know what's going on in 5 minutes and then get on with your day. If you're the kind of person who is intentional about your sleep, your workouts, your work, what you eat, but your news diet is just whatever your feed throws at you, this is for you. The same energy finally applied to how you stay informed. I'm one of the first creators on SAYSO, and my favorite feature is that I can link my sources right in the video. That way, you know how I'm telling you the truth. And if you sign up now, you'll be one of the first users to join. You can download SAYSO. The link is in the show notes and the description. Go check it out and be as smart as you know you are. All right, let's get back to the show. After Trump's election speech last week, Homeland Security Secretary Markwayne Mullin announced DHS would be going after alleged non-citizens on voter rolls in states using public voter data. And then he threatened state election officials that have refused to comply with the federal attempts to take over elections with prison time. And for those of you listening, these two are separate clips.
If you're illegal and attempted to vote, or you tried to vote illegally for someone else, we will find you and we will charge you. Illegal voter registration and illegal voting both carry penalties up to 5 years in prison and up to $250,000 in fines. We will pursue maximum pressure on this. I will tell you, if the states that choose not to participate with the state program and they choose not to participate in securing the elections, we will make sure that we make those states a priority to look at who voted in their states and hold then the election officials accountable. If the election officials, once we gave them the information they need to secure their elections, and they chose not to, then those individuals can also be held accountable by fines, by penalties, and even, depending on how far it goes, prison time.
That's a serious threat, and it's now been levied against election officials, not just from DHS, but also from the DOJ. And it's a threat that has an expiration date of August 4th, which is the start of the 90-day quiet period under the federal law when states can't alter their voter rolls. It's to protect eligible voters from being prevented from voting so close to an election. The second thing there is it's kind of telling. The Trump administration is now all of a sudden saying they can get the information they need to check state voter rolls for these alleged non-citizens from what's publicly available. It's as if this whole thing of the Department of Justice demanding access to private voter data to make sure that voter rolls were secure didn't really need to happen in the first place, which begs the question, so why are they suing for that private information? That feels like a different episode. But really, what Mullin is talking about here is a huge escalation of what the Trump administration wants to do in states across the country. In this speech, and in the president's speech, they allege there are nearly 300,000 non-citizens on voter rolls across the country. The database they're using is the SAVE system, which I've written about on the Substack before, although I'm not sure I've talked about it on the show, so I'll do it really quickly here. Up until Elon Musk and his DOGE boys got a hold of it, the SAVE system was used to make sure certain non-citizens were either eligible or not for some kinds of government programs. But DOGE turned it into this repository for all kinds of private information, including social security numbers, that was then shared across multiple departments. Almost exactly a month ago today, a federal judge banned the government from using this new mutated SAVE system because it violated multiple federal privacy laws. And she said in her ruling, the Trump administration, quote, haphazardly combined and repurposed the private information of millions of Americans, including citizenship data that they knew to be unreliable. Now, what we do know about how many non-citizens are registered and how many do actually vote is that it's extremely, extremely rare. And I know that I'm saying that today, as the governor of New Jersey announced that a system malfunction in 2023 and 2024 allowed 6,600 non-citizens to mistakenly register to vote in New Jersey, even though they marked that they were non-citizens, and around 400 did end up voting in separate parts of the state because they were told they were allowed to vote. Now, what happened in New Jersey isn't great. I'm not here to tell you that that's all fine. It's not. However, anyone telling you that it's proof that hundreds of thousands of non-citizens are voting across the country isn't telling you the truth either. As a percentage of the overall vote, it would have no impact on the outcome of the election in New Jersey in 2024. There were 4.2 million votes cast in New Jersey in that election. 400 votes in that election comes out to 95 thousandths of a percent. The thing is, what happened in New Jersey is how non-citizen voting happens most often when it ever does happen. It's a clerical error or an administrative error. It's not some nefarious non-citizen looking to steal an election. Also, as I'm recording, this seems to be an isolated issue with a single vendor in a single state over the course of a single year. That could change, and this could end up being a much bigger problem, but right now, and decades of study on this, just haven't shown that to be true. Finally, here on this escalation episode, DHS is back to escalating its immigration enforcement. Last week, I wrote about how there were more shootings at the hands of ICE officers in Maine and Texas, and now we have new numbers to show that ICE arrests have hit record levels. As of this month, ICE is arresting, on average, 1,474 people every day. That is less than their goal of 2,000, but it's not far off. And Trump's border czar, Tom Homan, who's taken over these immigration operations across the country, said over the weekend that the recent killings of unarmed immigrants who weren't even the subject of their investigations were actually on purpose, and that more are likely going to happen.
But it all goes back to the Dems, who want to continually attack ICE and tell people to evade them, tell people don't comply, tell people to resist, and tell people ICE isn't real law enforcement agency. You and I talked about this a year and a half ago, Laura. I said if the hateful rhetoric didn't stop, there will be bloodshed. And I'm saying it right now. There's still going to be more bloodshed unless they shut their mouth and let ICE enforce the laws that they enacted.
Sort of a killings will continue until morale improves kind of thing. Right now, we don't know exactly what the next moves are for DHS when it comes to immigration and the election, or likely both, combined. What we do know is that The clock is ticking down towards the election, and as that continues, the escalation and the pressure are most certainly going to go up. Okay, that is it for today's episode. Please rate and review. If this show is part of how you make sense of what's happening, become a subscriber to the Make It Make Sense Substack. That's where you get access to things you forgot from civics class, where this week's article is about how our elections really work and how we know they're safe. If you want to support the show, get access to that, the Make It Make Nonsense culture essays, the in-depth and investigative reporting pieces. It's all less than what you'd spend on one coffee a month between now and August 21st before the price goes up. And as always, you can share the show on social media. You can tag me at Grant Hermes on Twitter and Blue Sky and the SAYSO News app, and at Grant_Hermes on everything else. Thank you so much for listening today. I'm Grant Hermes, and I'll talk to you next time.